Thomas Edward Benning was a man who loved adventure. He was always looking for new challenges and exciting experiences. On a quiet day in April 1995, he decided to explore Black Cave in Arizona. It was a cave he had visited many times before, and he knew the twists and hidden passages well. That day, he felt confident enough to go alone. This time, he didn't bring a helmet, only an electric miner's lamp and his sense of direction. It might not have been the safest choice, but he had done it before and always managed to leave the cave without issues. This is the tragic story of the Black Cave disaster in April 1995. The cave, with its winding, hidden tunnels, felt familiar to him. It was a place where he always felt at ease. The first room he entered was large and open, but instead of following the usual path, he decided to take a different route. It was a side passage he had never explored before, an obscure, narrow tunnel that somehow called to him. The air was colder, and the tunnels darker than he was used to. After about an hour of crawling and climbing, Thomas realized he had lost his way. It was as if the cave had swallowed him up. He tried retracing his steps, but the tunnels seemed to blend into one another. It became a maze of passageways that led him deeper into the cave. His lamp began to flicker. His heart began to race. He needed light to see and find a way out. Just when he started to realize how serious the situation was, his lamp went out completely. He was left in total darkness, deep underground, miles away from daylight. In panic, he thought about what he could do. He didn't have a flashlight, and there was no source of light. Then, he remembered the matches in his jacket pocket. He struck one, and the tiny flame barely lit up the rocks around him. It wasn't much, but it gave him a glimmer of hope. He struck another match, and then another, each time using the brief moments of light to try and find his way. But matches burn out quickly. When the last match flickered and died, he was back in total darkness. Thomas didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Despite his fear and the chaos in his mind, he kept crawling through the dark tunnels, searching for an exit. He felt the walls around him, looking for any sign that he hadn't gone completely off course. He left small items behind to mark his path. A shoe, a torn trash bag, pieces of his clothing. Each item was a marker, a hope that one day he could find what he had left behind. After hours of wandering with no sign of the exit, Thomas came across a narrow crack in the rock. It was a small opening in the wall, barely 1.2 meters deep and just wide enough to try and crawl through. Maybe this crack would lead to an open space, or even back to the entrance of the cave. For a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. Slowly, he began lowering himself into the gap, trying to find a ledge in the rock to steady himself. But as soon as his hips passed the narrowest point, he realized the mistake. He was stuck. His body was wedged between the sharp rock walls that held him in place. He tried to push himself up, but it was as if the rocks were holding him there. He pushed with his hands against the walls, but his body wouldn't budge. He kicked his legs, using the little strength he had left, but each movement only seemed to push him deeper into the crack. He was stuck. There was no way out. The hours turned into days, and his body grew weaker. His arms were exhausted from hours of crawling, and his legs could no longer support him. He had no strength left to free himself. He began scratching at the rocks with his hands, hoping to find something to help him escape. But the rocks were hard and unyielding. There was no progress. Even if he had shouted for help, no one would have heard his voice in the silence of the cave. Time passed, and Thomas became more aware of his situation. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything since he entered the cave, and he was growing severely dehydrated. Hours became days. No one knew where he was because he hadn't told anyone which cave he was planning to explore. His wife grew worried when he didn't come home. She called the police, but the search was difficult. They didn't know exactly where to look. They searched the cave where they thought he had been, but couldn't find any trace of him. It took days before they finally found his car parked near the entrance to Black Cave. Rescue teams were sent, but they were unfamiliar with the obscure side tunnels that Thomas had taken. They searched the cave but missed the narrow passage that Thomas had entered. They went through all the known sections, but there was no sign of him. Meanwhile, far underground, Thomas's condition worsened. His breathing slowed, becoming shallow and uneven. His mind began to drift, caught between reality and exhaustion. The days passed, and eventually the search was called off. Thomas was officially declared missing. No one knew where he was. However, his wife continued to fight for answers. She posted flyers, made calls to anyone who might know something, and begged the authorities to keep searching. But the search was stopped. All she had left were memories of her husband and the question of whether she would ever know what really happened to him in the dark depths of the cave. More than a year and a half later, in December 1996, cave explorers Bill Graff, Elizabeth Robb, and Dale Green entered Black Cave again. They weren't searching for Thomas, but were exploring the cave as part of a mapping project. They took the same obscure side tunnel that Thomas had taken more than a year ago. About an hour in, they found something strange, a burned matchbook lying on the ground. Then they found a broken miner's lamp. There were other clues scattered around, matches and torn clothing. It was as if time had stood still, and the items told the story of Thomas's struggle for survival. At first, they didn't think much of it, but when they passed through the same tunnel later, curiosity got the best of them. They decided to explore the side tunnel where they had found the matches and scraps of clothing. It was narrow, barely 1 meter wide, leading to a low passage. As Robb crawled through, she found a shoe. Then she found a sock. A little further, they saw something that looked like a bundle of fur on the floor. But as Robb got closer, she realized it wasn't fur. When they all saw it, they froze. It was a horrific sight, and they were taken by surprise. The group had found Thomas Edward Benning. His body had been in the cave for so long that the explorers couldn't believe their eyes. They had heard about his disappearance months ago, but it seemed unreal. They took photos of the scene and collected the keys for identification. Upon closer inspection, they noticed deep scratches in the rock, evidence of his desperate struggle to free himself from the cave's unforgiving grip. Before leaving, they placed reflective markers to guide others back to the body and immediately reported the discovery to the sheriff. Days later, a recovery operation began. Cavers were called in to help with the tight spaces, and after several difficult trips into the cave, they managed to recover Thomas's body. His wallet, still in his pocket, confirmed his identity. Thomas had been lost for nearly 20 months, trapped in the cave he had explored so many times before. If only the searchers had known more about the cave's hidden tunnels, maybe Thomas could have been found alive. But Black Cave kept him hidden deep in the darkness until it was too late. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more gripping tales from the underwater world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do in a situation like this? Until next time, stay safe, explore wisely, and always respect the depths.